Welcome all. Good afternoon. Here we are. So with these three gentlemen, we are going to talk today about crowdfunding and how it is becoming an industry game changer. If you don't know about that, the crowdfunding industry currently represents a 10 billion market, and within that 1 billion is from the real estate. It's expected to grow this year up to 2.5 billion. The estimation is that crowdfunding market overall will be a 250 billion market by 2020. There are many players in the game that are well known by everybody, like the Kickstarters and Indiegogo. They are more likely to see other players from the finance market, like Lending Club, just got an IPO at an 8 billion valuation. So it's a very exciting market for people coming from the real estate industry, and we'll be exploring the different issues and opportunities from that market today. So we have three speakers. Let me introduce you to Scott Picken, the founder and senior manager partner of Wealth Migrate. So Scott, as Wealth Migrate is like today the leading, the first one, sorry. It's a global, let me do that better. So Wealth Migrate is a global self-service crowdfunding real estate platform. It's a solution. You are a serial entrepreneur, you are passionate about how technology can improve the real estate industry. Can you give us your initial statement about crowdfunding in real estate, please?
Welcome all. It's fantastic to be here. Thank you very much, Ben. I think in simple terms, I wrote a dissertation on this in 1998 on how technology was going to change property. I did my master's in London in 2001, and people thought that I was mad that technology would change an industry. But now we've got Uber, and many other industry changes. And I think the most important thing that people need to understand, with or without the three of us on the stage, it's going to happen. It's just a question of time.
It's really interesting to have a mix, because you come from a pure real estate background. We'll talk about that later, and now you're going to crowdfunding. Whereas we have Suleiman, who comes maybe more from the tech startup background with WiSEED, which is one of the first European equity crowdfunding platforms, and now you recently moved to the real estate sector. You are also helping you're the one right now in charge of WiSEED Immobilier, which is the part of WiSEED dedicated to real estate. Can you tell us a bit more about your take on crowdfunding in the industry?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. To make a long story short, there is a clear game changer going on. Crowdfunding in a way has already existed. I mean, if you look at the way the Statue of Liberty was funded, in a way it was old-style crowdfunding. Thanks to social networks, thanks to the web, you can now merge thousands, millions of individuals around a single project. And here, WiSEED was initially on startups and SMEs, and today we have that huge potential on real estate. Real estate projects are assets that individuals, crowds, you, me, everyone can understand and are very keen actually to invest in and to learn from inside. So here, there is a massive revolution going on and a massive flow of capital that will come from the crowd to this kind of projects.
Thank you. And here the third profile, we'll say it's more of a traditional player with GBS Suez, getting into crowdfunding for a totally different reason. And Mathieu is here to explain us a bit more what's going on with Green Channel, which is a platform that will enable project owners to get financed and accelerate the transition to green technologies. Explain us a little bit more about that.
Thank you very much for this introduction. Indeed, Green Channel will be a subsidiary of GDF Suez, and that gives the possibility to everyone to invest in green energy projects. It will be open to every project owners dedicated to renewable energy sources and also energy efficiency solutions. And of course, it's close to real estate. And the thing is that for us, beyond the what I wanted to say is that simply real estate is now for us more and more a new energy product, and combining centralized energy solutions with real estate through crowdfunding is for us a good business, we think.
Excellent. We'll get back to this later on. My name is Ben. You can ask questions through Twitter. I'll make sure that our panelists will follow up after that. So the hashtag is MIPIM. And we'll have some time at the end of the session to give you the mic so you can ask questions. So make sure that you prepare them. We'll take them all at the end. My very first question, I'd like to start with you, Scott, because before when we were discussing, you had that vision of helping like 1 billion people get to property by 2020. Can you tell us more about this vision? I think it's very interesting for the audience to understand better what moves you and how this change can be dramatically accelerated with emerging countries getting access to property via those platforms.
Yeah, Bennett, I could talk on this for days, but I think the most important thing that people need to understand is that when you look at what is happening at the moment, when you look at all the stats and percentages, currently North America, and I'm talking just in real estate equity crowdfunding, is 55% of the market, Europe is 42% of the market, and Asia is 2% of the market. When you look, that is the first world, this is a nice to have. In the emerging world, it is a necessity. When you look at the global population, currently at the moment, 12.9% of the world actually has access to real estate. I'd highly recommend going and watching a great TED talk by Niall Ferguson on the 6 killer apps of wealth. And it literally comes down to access to real estate. Only 12.9% of the world has access. When we look at the 12.9% of the world that actually has access, 99% of the people in the Western world retire poor. So I don't think we need a hell of a lot of more stats to prove that the system is not working. And so how can we reverse engineer? Well, our philosophy is that if we can get investments down to $1 per person per investment, through the use of technology, there'll be 1 billion handsets just in Africa alone, and a lot of people think in Africa we're a little bit backward. There'll be 1 billion handsets on the continent by 2016. There's 1.2 billion handsets in China alone. And with technology comes education, and with education comes the aspiration for wealth. And it's truly a possibility. And really what technology does in simple terms is it cuts out the middleman and makes it more trustworthy and transparent and accessible. And really, there's no reason why it can't happen for real estate, and thus happen for wealth. And the last thing I would say is that really this is not just a nice to have. Last year in Davos at the World Economic Forum, the wealth gap is now seen as the greatest risk to our continent and to the entire planet. And ultimately, for everybody in this room, this is the ability to close that wealth gap, not from taking away from the 1%, but empowering the 99%. And in the process, everyone in the 1% will be wealthier, healthier, happier, and live in a more sustainable planet. It's not just something nice, it's one of the most important things we've got going forward.
Thank you. We can applaud our speakers, I'm sure they will love it. Suleiman, can you, I'm sure you have some, your own opinion about that, and your vision maybe wasn't the same, it was more opportunistic to move to real estate at some point, but you have a vision around transparency, trust. Share a bit of this with us, please.
Exactly. I mean, just to remind you the story, WiSEED was the very first equity-based crowdfunding platform in France back in 2009. And at that time, our main objective was to democratize that access to that assets. I mean, if you are a simple citizen, not with a high level of savings, you have no chances actually to get access to that kind of assets. You have no chances to be able to invest directly in a startup or directly in SMEs. Like Scott is saying, you have such a high number of intermediaries with very limited level of value add. And this is what crowdfunding is bringing. We're not killing, but we are limiting the number of intermediaries to be sure that the amount of cash coming from these individuals could be directly and in the most transparent way invested in tangible assets in real economy. Our investors, our crowd of 40,000 individuals, are willing to create jobs, are willing actually to support innovation with, again, a limited number of intermediaries. So it was not, I'm going to say, an opportunistic move to go into real estate. Most of our community of investors asked us to offer them some different assets. Startups is a very high risky asset. Basically, you have 50% chances to have a complete loss of capital. Why? If you go on real estate, you have more tangible assets, and all investors were very keen actually to go in that kind of assets that they definitely understand in a better way, and in a sense that the price for the MIPIM is €1,000. Here, yeah. quite expensive. So yeah, you get the choice to make. Either you go to MIPIM or you can invest on the crowdfunding platform. And this is here the game changer, that someone with 1,000 euro can start having access to that kind of sort of elite assets, and there is a kind of democratization, and these people will be able to get the reward, the wealth for that kind of assets that they couldn't get before.
Can I ask just 1 second to the audience, who has ever invested, spent some money in a crowdfunding platform? Can you raise your hand? Okay.
Nice.
So, yeah, well, in real estate crowdfunding,
We will do it in a couple of days.
maybe we should have a bit more time about what is it, that we talk about. Equity crowdfunding, debt-based crowdfunding. Can you let us know if you want to? You can start.
Yeah, I can take it. Yeah, for sure. Equity crowdfunding is more related and maybe more adapted to more risky and innovative solutions. For the investors. So of course you have to be aware, and there is a specific legislation regarding this equity crowdfunding. For debt crowdfunding, in France at least, and in Europe, it's for more mature SMEs from the project on the side, and therefore you are lending money for shorter maturities. It's in more 3 to 5 years typically. And then you have the reward-based crowdfunding, where basically the project owner is presenting a new prototype on his platform, and if he succeeds, which means that if there are any interest from the different crowdfunders and different buyers, then the product will be made, built, and so on. And there is the donation-based crowdfunding. Typically, the most famous example is the financing of the Barack Obama campaign. And there are also some other climate fight donation-based, cancer, or in health. There are also donation-based platforms. That's it. But it has to be very clear on which platform you are going to and what kind of investments you are doing. So with respect to Green Channel, if I may, our idea is to propose financial products between 10 to 20 years of maturities. So we think it's well adapted for retirement investing notably, and offering attractive return between 3 to 7%, depending on the countries and the kind of financing structuration we are dealing with.
Yeah. So maybe Scott, you can get into this.
I just wanted to, if you want me to, what I'd like to do is use a specific example, because I think it makes a lot more sense rather than high-level talk. So as an example, in 2009, I was in Bondi Beach in Sydney, and I was there with my now founder and chairman of our business, co-founder and chairman. And he's a billionaire. He's listed 2 companies, one in Africa, one in Australia, in the medical, commercial, real estate space. We were buying medical buildings, ticket items of $20, $30, $50 million. He was there with another one of his friends. It's the sort of opportunities that I didn't ever get access to. I had the privilege of traveling with them, learning with them, etc. But when it came to putting money on the table, I was just a jockey on the horse. I wasn't really part of the race. And so really what happened when crowdfunding came along is a similar opportunity. And for those of you who haven't thought or understood medical, in the first world it's a common sense investment. As people get older, they need doctors. Doctors don't tend to move, they pay higher rents. And really when you've got a domain expert, as in we do with our chairman, and we've got domain experts on the ground, we've been picking up key assets where we want to spend more than $1 million in equity, because we don't want to be with the mom and pops, doctors and dentists who are trying to, it's very overcrowded. We also don't want, in terms of, to be over $10 million in equity, because then that's where all the big hedge funds and REITs are, and we don't want to have an arm wrestle with them. In simple terms, we pick up great assets where the returns, the cap rates are 8, 9% in the US at the moment, long-term leases, blue chip tenants. And what crowdfunding enabled me to do was 3 things. Firstly, I could participate with 100,000 US. So I was now in the deal. I wasn't learning, I was actually participating in the deal. The second thing was there were no fees all the way through the process. So the bottom line is my return as an investor was directly exactly the same as Henny's return, even though he put in literally 10 or 100 times what I actually put in terms of capital. And the last thing that I think was extremely important is that we actually raised that money, over $6 million in equity on 5 different continents. And so really that for me explains the essence of what crowdfunding is. And the last thing I would say on that, which I think is critically important, is that the technology guys love to use a lot of fancy terms. But really this space is a real estate space. A lot of people don't know and go and read a book called How to Create a $1 Billion App, and it goes into Uber. And people don't know that the 2 guys that created Uber partnered with 2 taxi drivers. The bottom line is you've got to have experience in the space you're playing in. And really what I'm trying to get at is that this is a real estate space, and in terms of that specific opportunity, there's another deal that's just come up, and 70% of the investors that invested in that deal have reinvested in the next deal, and we're talking less than 6 months, because they got their quarterly dividends. They actually managed to get $1 million of capital uplift literally as we transferred, because we managed to put extra tenants in, etc., etc., etc. My point being is that now you've got the trust, you've got the transparency, and most importantly, you've got the accessibility. And that's what changes the rules of the game. And our philosophy is in this space, no one has to compete with each other. I don't want to come to France and try and sit here and try to be a domain expert in France. I'm not. I would much rather partner with WiSEED and we do it together. And collectively, we all win globally.
Great. Just to complete, we have heard about long-term investment. On the way WiSEED works, we are more on short-term investments. Our maturity is roughly between 12 and 30 months. So basically, you take, for instance, a residential housing project, 10 million euros turnover, and then the banks will require, let's say, 1%, actually, or 10%, sorry, of equity. And we are bringing actually this 1 million euros of equity directly from a crowd, either on shares or on bonds. And what is surprising about what Scott is saying is that we have, in addition to the funding, a wonderful tool of communication. It's not only funding that developers, that operators are looking for on the crowdfunding. They're looking for visibility, they're looking for communication. And in addition to the funds that they're going to collect, they get a chance actually to speed up the sales of their different assets. So it's sort of very collaborative actually approach, and we can use as well, like Scott is saying, the collective intelligence of a crowd to better understand the areas where you're doing the project. We have actually regulations in France regulating actually the crowdfunding. There is not yet actually a European-based regulation, and that is, I guess, the next challenge. We need to have a global regulation that will speed up the market, that will reassure the investors and the developers.
We will cover this afterwards because tons of things to talk about, regulations and difference in between territories. Maybe you want to pick the point about visibility of the projects.
Yes, exactly, and the pros of doing crowdfunding. Of course, there is this communication aspect, this e-notoriety on which we can talk about. There is also the question of local acceptance, especially for renewables, but also for real estate. And behind this think global and act local, there is also the concept of not only co-invest, but also co-decide. So if a project succeeds, it's also because there is enough popularity and people decided to go to this project. So that's what it's important for crowdfunding. And on top of that, if I just come back a few seconds around the financing aspect, so we used to have in the financing the risk-return parameters in the investment equations, and now what we have is transparency, as said before, but we also have conviction, like here for green energy or real estate, but also in some other crowdfunding sectors like art, sports, or it can be in motion as well. So basically, that's the big advantage of crowdfunding is to go beyond this risk-return equation.
No, that's a very important point. I mean, if you look at where it comes from, outside from real estate, transparency was a key element of success from the first platform that kickstarted and all that. And actually, some of the projects that were financed didn't actually launch the product. And there's a lot of topic, can find a lot of discussion about that. I imagine that for real estate it's even more important in a sense, because we're talking about houses, buildings, we're talking about lots of money. How do you manage that? I mean, how do you actually make sure that transparency is part of your value proposition as a business?
There is a lot of pedagogy to be done actually with the operators. I mean, you're right, that's not a market where professionals are used to share with the crowd the balance sheet of the operation, their commercialization strategy, the way they are looking actually for new opportunities. But there is here a big challenge that we try to explain them, that if they are transparent, if they are trying to make that crowd the best ambassadors of their brand, they get a chance first obviously to raise quickly the fund that they're looking for. If I take the last operation we did last week, we raised 600K in roughly 6 minutes. So there is a high willingness from the investors, from the crowd, to get access to that kind of assets. And the second point is the fact that individuals, in a way, are willing to learn from the inside what real estate is from the inside. There is a kind of common, let's say, mindset that developers, operators, or wealthy people, that it's an easy job, it's not so much technical, but we all know here it's a challenging job. We all know here that times could be difficult, and this is the challenge that we can assume that we can get from the crowd to explain them directly that kind of projects, that kind actually of challenges need professionals, need anticipation, need business models. And so there is a great challenge and a great opportunity for the full market, for all the professionals actually to share the way they work with the crowd, because these are your customers, these are potentially your future investors, and I'm sure that once you get to get them like faithful, once you get to have them really granted to your values, you get a chance to have a massive flow of capital and frequent actually possibilities to have them investing in your projects.
I think from our perspective, we set everything up based on nature's laws. And the way we see it, and you mentioned stuff that was done in the 1800s in terms of the Statue of Liberty, we've got the synagogue, we've got Stockfells, we've got BYN in Asia, all ancient traditions, and there's 3 reasons they succeed. The first one is trust, the second one is transparency, and then when you look at the animals going across the African savannah, does a buck sit on its own? No, it gets eaten by a lion. They go together, and when they work together, they succeed. And the point being is that in our business, to start off with the trust, we don't believe at the moment that technology is there enabled enough to do good enough due diligence to decide whether a project is good enough or not. It's one thing to catch a taxi and you get it wrong and you miss your plane. It's another thing to invest in the deal and make a big mistake. It can take you down for a generation. So for us, having done this for 3 decades, we're pulling on our trusted partners that we've already done over 10,000 deals with in Australia, the UK, the USA, and using people that already have a trusted track record in terms of where they are. The second thing from a transparency perspective is we set the entire deal up to have transparency right from the beginning through to the end, so that it's not this olden day syndication where I buy it for 100, I put a price of 120 on it and I syndicate it back to you and I make a whole lot of fees at the beginning, the middle and the end, and at the end of the day investor loses. And that all happens through technology, and I think that's fairly easy and understandable. And the last part, which I think is the most important part, and it comes back to what you were talking about, it's about having your interests aligned. If you go into anything in life where your interests are not aligned, you will fail. So if you get married and your wife wants to take all your money, it's probably not going to be a happy marriage. Or if your husband wants to be a bum and the wife wanted to have a highly successful husband, whatever, it's not going to work. If you've got a business partner that wants to sit on the beach, it's not going to work. The point being, why do we go into real estate deals in syndications where everyone, the brokers earn their commission on the front end, but I as the investor want to make my money on the back end? Or typical fund structure, the 2 and 20, where I'm incentivized just to have as much money under management, but not actually look after the investor on the back end. And in simple terms, we set the entire structure up so that the interests are aligned and everyone benefits together. And that starts even in the education space. People are tired of going along and reading a book or learning a course and then going out and not knowing what to do. We say, come along, partner with us, learn through the process. So I'd like to believe that we've literally set the business up to cater for all three of the core fundamentals, and it's our very philosophy upon which we build the business.
I'd like to ask you all about the potential of crowdfunding to address issues that maybe real estate is not, I don't know how to say that, it's hard to address, which is anything related to social housing, for example. Can you do something in that space differently than traditional players?
I mean, we have already started that. We have already funded 2 social housing operations. They have the advantage to have very limited level of risk because all the apartments, all the houses are already sold. The counterparts, the drawback obviously is that the profitability may not be of interest for an institutional investor, and this is where crowdfunding actually brings the value. Individuals, if you look at France, they will go to their banks, they will go to their financial advisor, and at the maximum they will get an internal rate of return of like 4 or 5% because they will have huge management fees. And here with crowdfunding, even in investing in sort of housing projects, social housing projects, they will still get an internal rate of return of 9%. Which is quite huge, but still quite acceptable for an operator that if you want to look for equity by other means, we pay probably a higher cost of capital. So yeah, I think by the fact that individuals have the ability to accept different terms, even though the risk management needs to be perfect and needs to be in a way that the first operations must not fail. I mean, so it's a very new market. It was 2-3 years that real estate crowdfunding is growing. We have no right, on the first operations. That's why risk management, due diligence are the core aspects. But here, I think the crowd can invest in projects that usual investors may not invest or will make it difficult to happen. For instance, another example in Paris, like in London in the previous speech, we have huge issues actually of hotels. But the fields are so expensive that institutional investors are not very keen to invest in that kind of assets. While the crowd here, if you can offer them, if you can have an engineering that would give them, let's say, 9-12% per year, it's a wonderful project for them. They understand it from the inside. There is still a risk, but here again, you have the opportunity to develop projects that would never have been able to be launched without the cash coming from the crowd.
No, well, look, I get to live in a beautiful place in Africa, and it's quite hard in Europe for people to really understand the impact that you can have in terms of the social and the crowd. And I mean, when you consider that people can start to invest in affordable housing projects, and my business partner is the second biggest affordable housing developer in South Africa, the impact that you can have just in houses and hospitals. Now, if you're in the crowd, you don't have to have a huge amount of financial degrees or financial nous to use common sense. Do they need houses and do they need hospitals? Yes or no? You can get, if I told you the returns, you would laugh because you would think I was lying in terms of because there's a real necessity for them. So to come back to what you're saying, you can get great returns, but ultimately what you've got to be able to do is find trusted partners to deliver on those returns. For the very reason most people in this room and most people at this event wouldn't chuck their money into Africa or Asia or different markets that they're nervous about, it's battling to find the trusted partners. And really what crowdfunding will allow, and this is the future, it's a bridge of safety. It'll help people in the emerging world invest safely in the first world, and it'll help people in the first world invest safely in the emerging world for higher returns.
In your area, obviously, your goal is to accelerate the transition to renewable energy solutions. Can you explain us a bit more what is the main vision of that? I know that there is New Horizon as well. That is part of the bigger picture. Horizon, sorry. I'm just wondering if those questions about social housing, I just wanted to wrap it up around what you do in your field with energy, and maybe other initiatives that you have. Just
okay.
Yes.
I can give you a few examples.
Yes, please.
Concrete ones. We are currently working on thermal solar plants connected to district heating network in some small cities. So the idea here is to promote renewable energy sources and packages for small cities, but also big cities, of course. There is also the idea of refinancing some big solar plants that will enable us, or GDF Suez, to have a rotation of their capex. Once the solar plant is built, then it's less risky for a small investor to invest in such a project, and then the project owner can use the cash for other developments. That's the idea of going faster and going greener and going together, as has been already said.
There must be some rules existing, rules and regulations that make it
Yes, that's a very good point, and that's where I'm not 100% comfortable today to talk about social housing, because we also have to be very careful in terms and transparent on the way we are selecting our projects. And there we have criteria. Of course, environmental criteria, financial criteria, and technical criteria. We are not doing crowdfunding for innovation. We are more doing crowdfunding with more mature technologies. And that's also what we observe when we talk about green growth, generally speaking. You see that in 2013, the investment bill all over the world was lower than in 2012, which could be a negative message. However, the number of renewable projects, was higher than 2012, which means that the technology is less and less expensive, and we are transferring less and less risk to the investors. And for us, according to us, it's very important.
Can you share with the room what's going on in terms of regulation? I mean, I'm asking all the panelists between territories and between the different type of crowdfunding, and what you are expecting from the regulators. I imagine that you are expecting, for example, the European Union to move in the space, whereas some countries are more advanced, I would say, like the US or UK legislations are better for that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want just to compare, for instance, France and US, there is a tendency to do some French bashing and to say that the US regulation is more advanced, but I'm sorry, but it's false, because if you look at the crowdfunding regulation in US, only experienced investors are allowed to invest in equity-based crowdfunding. So if I want to meet someone in the street able to invest €1,000, he won't be able actually to invest on a US equity-based platform. While in France, thanks to the new regulation, any citizen is able today to invest his cash actually on equity-based platform up to €1 million per project. So the equity-based regulation in France is quite well down. There is still some challenges to overcome, specifically when we speak about real estate. We are capped to €1 million, but we all know that for some projects we need to be able to raise higher equity. So we are doing an intense lobbying to be able to move that cap to €5 million. And on a European level, that's the challenge. Every country has its own regulation. There are currently discussions going on with the European Commission. It's going slowly but in the right direction, and I think they have all understood that in these times of European market having hard time actually to overcome the crisis, that we have a need to impulse new capital in technology, in innovation, and obviously in real estate. So I think the European Commission has understood that there is a need to have a common regulation that will help the crowdfunding platforms to offer, for instance, to a German citizen the ability to invest in the French project and vice versa. And that, I think, would come in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think on the back of that, I mean, cross-border gets very, very complicated. I mean, literally different countries can have mutually exclusive laws which make it completely impossible. And that's where we spent the best part of 5 years actually understanding how you would do it and how you would move between different jurisdictions. I think one of the most important things is that you've got to have local experts, local legal experts that have the domain expertise to make sure that you are legal in every country in terms of that cross-border, in terms of exactly what you're saying. And certainly from our experience, the best thing I could say to everyone is that this report came out literally on Tuesday last week, which was the industry report for real estate crowdfunding. And they've looked at all the different markets around the world. And I was amazed. There's probably 20 pages in there on the regulation side. And for me personally, and I mean, this is what I do, I'm passionate about this. I learned a huge amount about different countries, what's positive, what's negative, where the growth's going to be. As an example, they reckon that the biggest growth area is Asia in terms of what's happening, and specifically from a regulation perspective. And so, you know, I highly recommend people that are interested in this space. And this comes from the top research house in this domain, in this expertise. So I'd highly recommend, if people want to understand this, to go and read it. But I would also say, the last thing I would say, please don't go down the road and try and talk to a lawyer or your accountant, because generally they don't understand the rules. I guarantee you they'll tell you it's not possible, and 100 reasons, like you said with France, and 100 reasons it's not possible. You've got to go to the people that do understand what they're doing, and then you will get the right advice.
You need to go to the people that do the regulations. I mean, if we look 2 years ago when we initiated the discussions with the French financial authorities, I mean, there were no legal framework for crowdfunding, so we had to create it. We had to be innovative, and I think this is what needs to be done in other countries.
Yes. And if I may, to make it short, of course there is this question of legislation harmonization. However, we will still have to address the question of different tax mechanisms and also the question of digitalization. The different services behind the platform are more or less digitalized in the different countries, and it makes it more or less difficult depending in the country where you are. To say it very shortly, in the UK, for example, where you have a fintech where the legislation is there but not maybe so sophisticated as in France, it can be maybe more easier to do crowdfunding than in France. And what I see is in Germany, for example, it's going faster and faster, and I expect that it will be higher than in France in terms of amount raised in 2015 or 16.
Just maybe just one example to show you that, I mean, regulators need actually to understand that the crowdfunding wave is going. You can't stop it. Obviously, you have to regulate it. You have to protect investors. But a couple of months ago, the German financial authorities were discussing about preventing crowdfunding platforms from using social networks. And as you say, like, how come can you try to have such a regulation? So yeah, there is a clear need actually to speed up that process and indeed to protect investors from the legal risk of having that kind of investment.
I think over the last 12 months it's been incredible. If you'd asked me 12 months ago, I thought we were going to have the equivalent of an Arab Spring, where people would say, right, this is what I want, and the regulators would be caught with their pants down. But actually, what's happened is they've been very, very proactive all over the world, and what they realize is that if they don't, someone in Malaysia will just not invest in Malaysia, they'll just invest in France because they can, and so they'll have capital moving out of their countries, and they've realized not only to stimulate their own growth, but they've got to get their countries going. In some countries, France is obviously doing really well, Malaysia is really ahead of the trend, Italy passed their legislation in 6 months, so there's some being hell of a productive and proactive in getting this sorted, which is awesome because I thought it was going to take a lot longer than it has.
Okay, before we start taking questions from the audience, so be ready if you want to grab the mic. One last question for each one of you. If someone in the crowd, I mean, what can you provide the people in the audience? How can you help them? And what are you expecting from them? For each one of you, please.
So far, I have a rich problem. They say that my investors are looking for projects to invest in, and I don't have enough projects.
Okay. So please bring your projects to this guy. Thank you. Please, yes, Mitchell. Yes.
Same.
You want projects?
Yeah,
bring projects.
We will want projects and discuss with cities, with industries as well. We are looking for energy efficiency and energy savings, finance that approach, and get in notoriety or gain in visibility through the web.
Okay, so you're not looking for money, you're looking for projects.
I'm looking for money through my role of being a project broker.
Sorry, Scott?
I think from our side it's very simple. For investors that want to have diversification and invest in the US, the UK and Australia, we've got quality partners and quality projects on the ground. For people that are based in those jurisdictions, it's certainly a conversation we want to enter in terms of finding, like you said, in terms of finding good opportunities. And the last one I would say, not just to everyone on this panel, but everyone in this room, I would implore you to join the wealth movement and to get behind it, because it's actually in the interests of not just governments, not just individuals, not just crowdfunding portals, but every single individual on this planet to make this happen, because this really is the sustainable difference between a good or bad future for this planet. So.
Questions? Raise your hand and they will bring a microphone over there.
Alexander Fischbaum, AF Advisory. Thank you very much to the panel. When I've done research into crowdfunding, and I would like to get some feedback from you, the limitation on what the individual investor invests per transaction, the number was actually very small. I came up between $200 and $500. As a result of this, the projects in America that I've seen listed on crowdfunding sites were typically between $100,000 to $200,000, either small shops or family homes, and a similar thing in the United Kingdom. What can you tell us about the average size of investment that the crowd investor hands over to you, and how do you see this sum going forward, because these small projects also limit the ability to create value for the project manager?
To answer personally to your question, if you look at WiSEED Real Estate Crowd, we have an average per investor, an average investment of €3,800, but we have a huge standard deviation. The minimum investment ticket is €1,000, and today we have family offices, entrepreneurs investing between 100, 200, 300k per project. And I think in the next coming month, we will see still that kind of diversification in terms of growth, but we will probably see with the improvement of our deal flow, more and more professional investors coming to appreciate such deal flow. If you look at a US-based crowdfunding platform, they are funded more and more by professional investors because they have access to such a huge deal flow, they have such a limited cost of transaction that makes it very interesting for them to access.
Can I? Basically, again, back to the report that literally came out 7 days ago. The number all over the world now, and it was $1 billion got literally in 2014, came through real estate crowdfunding. And the average deal size in equity was $963,000 plus minus, to put in perspective. So it just gives you, I think it is moving away from the Kickstarter putting in $5 and they're buying a house versus actually doing quality investment. Certainly from our perspective, our minimum investment is $10,000 at the moment. Our average investment is about $50,000 per investor, and we've had numerous investors invest north of $1 million individually. So we've chosen, the aspiration is to go to the $1 per person per project, but right now we don't believe technology is there yet. There still are human beings that are involved in the process. There still is the risk that needs to be done and the checking, etc., etc., etc. And because of that, it's tended to be more qualified, accredited investors that are going for it. But things are going to change, and when technology changes, that's when it really will empower people.
Yeah, quickly. The legislation answers to that question in France. You can, if you are an equity platform, you can, there is no sale in terms except the €1 million for the project to be funded. But for the investor, there is no sale except the recommendation that the investor is not investing more than 10% of his capital or his own. But again, it's a recommendation.
Just I'd like to add something. Back to winter 2014, WiSEED tried actually a crowdfunding operation to acquire a part of a French airport. And it was actually quite a massive amount. So we had to build a specific financial engineering to help us to overcome that cap of 1 million euro. And here we were very surprised actually to get a pledge of 8,000 investors pledging for 18 million euros. So there is here, yeah, indeed, like you said, a potential to get access to definitely bigger and more valuable projects, which is coming and is coming with the regulation as well.
Thank you. I hope it answers your question. Question to that?
I'm a developer in Florida. So which are the costs that we need to pay, carrying cost fees for equity fundraising?
If I take the WiSEED real estate model, we don't charge on the operators and developers point of view, we don't charge any due diligence fee. We charge a success fee between 8 and 10% of the equity or mezzanine debt that we are bringing to you, and there is no as well exit fee. So we have a business model based only on the results and actually on our capacity to achieve the target that you're looking for.
Scott, how do you do?
Yeah, we don't have a due diligence fee either. So for us, it's we provide the investors with a hurdle rate, and we work with our partners on the ground based on a performance fee over the hurdle rate. So there's no, again, it's exactly based on a success fee. It's not based on a cost up front.
We are in the middle. In the end, it's maybe it will be close to WiSEED, but we are charging a 3.5% success fee. But we charge also an upfront fee, which is a euro per day consultancy service that we provide to the project owner. So we have two segments or two elements, one upfront, one as a success fee.
And just one comment to your question is you have to understand, I think it's the same for all of the three, that crowdfunding is specific by the fact that the process is extremely quick. If you get actually still a good due diligence, but you have like a lean process to do it, then afterwards the time of collecting the cash is impressively quick. In 4 to 6 weeks we are able actually to fund a 1 million project. 1 million euro project, which would take you actually with an investment fund or a bank a couple of months actually to get an agreement. So we know that in your job, speed is an incredible factor of success, and crowdfunding actually is addressing it.
Is paid when the people send the money.
After you have received the cash, exactly.
Yeah, and there's any special documentation that you need to prepare outside of our subscription agreements and operating agreements?
We have to develop actually a specific teaser for each operation where all the conditions will be transparent for the investors.
Yeah, same for us. I mean, look, it's not, at the end of the day, crowdfunding is not a new rocket science. It's very similar to what you've done. It's just being enabled by technology.
There should be a progressive approach in the information for the investor. So first step is very high level description, then progressively through the platform you can get more detailed information up to 10, 20 or 30 page documents.
But I also think what people need to understand, particularly if you're a developer, if you take the Kickstarter campaign where they stole cool boxes. Now, I know it's not real estate, but just think about this. They literally launched it and in less than 24 hours raised $14 million. But more importantly, they sold 56,000 cool boxes. I was sitting in South Africa and I heard about it. I wanted to buy a cool box and they can't produce them quick enough. It gets you massive market reach and knowledge to what it is. And you know, a lot of people need to look at it from their marketing budget perspective as to the impact that can have, you know, versus other marketing avenues. It really has a big impact on projects.
Last year there was an interesting study about that, and it showed that all types of crowdfunding, equity, donation, debt, will increase by 23%. The turnover of the company was actually benefited from the crowdfunding operation in the next quarter after the operation. So there is, in addition to the cash, a massive impact on your visibility and on your sales power.
Good afternoon. My name name is Marek, and I'm the founder of Estate Guru crowdfunding platform for secured property loans. At first, I'm happy to see that the big players of crowdfunding are on the stage. Last year, I was performing in Innovation Forum and talked about crowdfunding, and everybody looked at me like alien and what's going on. And when I asked the question in this hall where the big fund managers were on the stage about the crowdfunding, how does it affect the future investment market, then the guys looked at each other and didn't get the point what the guy is asking. But we're in the middle of a big boom, and just the question for you, what do you think, when do the big players as Google or Amazon or Apple or big American IT companies go for crowdfunding? And the other question, Lending Club just made the first IPO. How do you see a Lending Club to enter the crowdfunding market? Would they be the competitor in the future? Thank you.
I mean, Lending Club has a partnership already with Google, and Google Ventures had invested, I think in last year, 2013, like $350 million in Lending Club. So there is already that kind of connection with the big players. But like Scott said, I think the difference with being Facebook, Google, or Amazon, and if you're selling actually, let's say, any type actually of retail products. When you're speaking about investment, you need local and specific expertise. And I hardly see Google from the Silicon Valley trying to realize the due diligence of real estate housing project being done in Cannes. So either we will be acquired, either I think they will still need to collaborate with local platforms. If you look at the market of the banks, you may wonder why the massive banks, have not, let's say, conquered the world. Because still, when you're speaking about finance, when you're speaking about cash, there is that kind of very close relationship between the assets and the investors that I hope the big players wouldn't break.
I share this point, and maybe that's where the kind of platforms counts. The sense that for a debt platform, maybe Google or banks will be more interested in. For equity, whatever it is, bonds or shares, there is a need for more specificities, understanding the business to explain this business to the investors. See, that's where there will be a trend. And as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I know, banks are still working on this crowdfunding, are looking at crowdfunding solutions in Europe. BNP Paribas, for example.
I think, when you look at it, everyone looks at the dot-com boom and bust, and they all wonder what happened, and is this the next one? And the ones that came through, Amazon was an expert in distribution. eBay was an expert in auctions. Priceline was an expert in travel. And really, real estate, more than anything else, is where you've got to have the expertise to be good or bad. And it's not just a vanilla, anyone can come in and just because you're Mark Zuckerberg and you own Facebook, now suddenly you can help people buy properties. So I feel quite strongly about the vertical in terms of the real estate space and having the expertise in it.
Thank you. I have one question over there.
I'm on projects and properties in Nigeria. The panel mentioned the panel mentioned crowdfunding for real estate projects in Asia at 2% and Europe at 42%, but not mentioned anything on Africa. Has crowdfunding been used for African markets in real estate sector? How successful and what are the bottlenecks?
I can answer that if, again, sorry, I'm going to keep referring to the report. It's $7 million was raised in Africa in total out of $1 billion in 2014. So certainly it's a drop in the ocean at the moment, but the funding gap in Africa is, Nigeria, Kenya and the rest of Africa is worse than almost anywhere on this planet. And therefore it actually allows crowdfunding to come in and provide a solution in, I don't know how many of you know this, but in the same way that technology and cell phones was developed in Kenya to be able to send money through your cell phone, and it literally is taking on Visa and MasterCard worldwide, and it was created out of necessity in Kenya, and I think it will be no different in Nigeria and all over the rest of Africa personally.
And just comment about Africa, if you look about the billions going through, for instance, Western Union to African countries, you really understand that the diaspora is very willing actually to support their own countries. And I'm sure that crowdfunding in a way could be as well a new vector actually to bring the cash in a transparent way to one specific project. But yeah, I think there is still a way to go.
But with quality partners. You know, I don't want to be putting my money into Nigeria unless I know where I'm investing.
Exactly.
And I think, with respect to decentralized energy, that Europe has to learn from Africa in this field. And yes, crowdfunding through digitalization and financing can bring a lot of decentralized energy solutions in the future.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you, Scott, Suleiman, and Mathieu. I will be around. There's tons of great conferences about digital revolution here at MIPIM. I hope to see you there. You can reach me as well on Twitter. I'll be happy to know people who are in digital and tech and startups. I hope there will be more of them every year, and I'm really happy to have you today.
And could I just say one last thing quickly?
Yeah.
I think it's really important for people to understand that this might not change their business today, but it will change their business 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And just with regards to this report, we've actually got a form outside. If people fill it in, I've spoken to the guys at Mass Solutions so that we can share the knowledge, because I feel very passionately, as hopefully my panelists do, people need the right knowledge and then they can make the right decision. So please take advantage of that, because then it's not hearsay, you get the facts.
Yeah. Thank you very much.